Hello, everyone. So I'm here to talk about a readathon that is going on next year. This is a readathon that Michael at Catalyst Reads came up with, and it's the Rereadathon. And so this is, as the name would suggest, is a project to reread some books. And so it's kind of a year-long project. Michael came up with sort of a few different genres to pick a book to reread from for each month of the year. And so there's 2 or 3 per month. But Michael emphasizes in his video, I'll link his video below, but he emphasizes no one should feel pressured to partake in every single prompt, every single category, or even partake in every single month. It's just a way to encourage people to reread more books, which I love because I like rereading. The times that I've done it, I don't do it that often, but I want to do it more. So it seemed like a perfect opportunity. So I'll leave the list of prompts that he gave for each month in the description. I'm not going to list every single one out. I'm going to list out the ones that are relevant to me and that I have books that I can pick for them, because there are some genres that he lists that I've never read a book in the genres, so I can't really pick a book to reread from, like horror. So I'll leave that below, and again, I will leave a link to Michael's video. But so for January, one of the options was to reread your favorite book of all time. And I hate to say that I have a favorite book of all time, just because it feels very final. But if I were to decide on a favorite book of all time, one of the biggest contenders would be Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this will be my pick for that. And so this is the legends of Middle-earth from before The Lord of the Rings happened, basically, in Arda, which is the actual name of the world that Tolkien created. So it's a story of the elves, mainly, and from the creation of the world until... actually, it ends with a brief sort of description of the events of The Lord of the Rings in the very last chapter. But basically, it goes from the creation of the world to just before The Lord of the Rings picks up. So yeah, that is my pick for the favorite book of all time category. For February, one of the categories is reread your favorite book from school. And my favorite novel that I've ever read, and a novel that I have wanted to reread for so long, because... well, anyway, it's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I was so moved by the end of this book. I remember loving it, but I don't remember that much of what happens in it, because I was talking to a friend of mine who just graduated from high school and was in the same class as me, and she was talking about this book and talking about, oh, when this happens and this happens. I'm like, when does that happen? So, yeah, I definitely need to reread this. So that is my pick for that one. For March, one of the prompts is reread a non-fiction book, and I have a couple that I am going to choose from when the time comes. These are all books that I don't remember a lot from, that I want to reread, so I'm going to put them out here as options. But the first is Zealot by Reza Aslan, which is... it's subtitled The Life and Times of Jesus, so it's sort of an attempt of Reza Aslan to create a popular history of the life of the historical Jesus, to the extent that there is a historical Jesus, which I remember finding fascinating, but which, again, I don't remember very much from. Aside from that, Jesus may have been an important member of this very extremist group of Jews called the Essenes. So yeah, that is one option. The next one is a much bigger book. It's A History of the Arab Peoples by Albert Hourani, which is... title's pretty self-explanatory. It's a history focusing on the Middle East, of course, because that's where a lot of the Arabs are. But I've always been fascinated with Islamic history. I read this a few years ago, and it would just... I like learning about Islamic history, and it'll be fun to experience it again, sort of experience this history all over again, I guess, in the form of this book. So, yeah, that's my second option. And my last option is The 12 Caesars by Matthew Dennison. which is a history of the lives of 12 Caesars, starting with Augustus, or starting with Julius Caesar, and going through to, I can't remember what the last Caesar was in here, but whichever 11 Caesars came after Julius Caesar are the Caesars that he talks about in here. And again, fascinating, but again, I don't remember much from it, so it's up here as another option. So there's that. So for April, one of the options is to reread a book that confused you or that you had mixed feelings about, and a novel that definitely confused me and that I definitely had very mixed feelings about was Look Homeward, Angel by Thomas Wolfe. I didn't not like this book. I just had conflicting feelings about the weird experimental style it's written in, and whether it should have been trimmed, because it's pretty long. But yeah, I want to give it another chance because, someone commented on my video that I made about it, kind of explaining some of the weirdnesses of this novel and how maybe I approached it wrong. So I'm gonna see whether if I approach it differently, maybe I'll be able to change my perspective on it. This is, by the way, a sort of a very heavily autobiographical novel of Eugene Gant, a young boy growing up in North Carolina, and it's kind of the story of his family, his mom and his dad, and his siblings. But he is kind of the centerpiece. It is kind of a portrait of the entire family, but he is like the main character. And it goes up until he's about 19, I think, and when he leaves home for a school in the Northeast. So yeah, it was a very beautifully written novel. I just again had a hard time with the experimental style. The next month I was interested in was July, where one of the prompts is to reread a book by a woman. There are several prompts for that one. The other possibilities are to reread a book by an LGBTQIA author, or reread a book that has a theme of diversity. But I picked a book by a woman, and it's a book I really enjoyed when I read it. It's The Liars Club by Mary Karr. So her memoir of growing up in Texas with an alcoholic father and a mother who had a psychotic episode at one point and also was sort of an alcoholic and was also just behaved very erratically. So she had a very interesting childhood in Texas. So yeah, I will definitely look forward to reading this. I would prefer to reread her third memoir, Lit, because that was my favorite one. It was about her time as an alcoholic and recovering from alcoholism. But I don't have my copy with me. I lent it to my mom. So that's well, I might be able to get that by July. But for now, at least, for the purposes of this video. For August, one of the prompts is to reread a book of poetry, and for that, I picked New and Selected Poems by Mary Oliver. I really like Mary Oliver. I have mixed feelings about the actual quality of her poetry. I don't know whether she's really a great poet, but I do really enjoy reading her. So yeah, I think rereading her will be good because it'll maybe give me a chance to focus my views on her. What if she stands up to a rereading, then maybe it'll make me a bit more confident that she's a good poet. But if I read her a second time and find that it's all kind of falling flat, well, maybe that'll be a good sign that her poetry isn't as great as I thought it was when I first read it. So yeah. Next is September, reread a classic novel, and for me, this was a no-brainer, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I read this a couple years ago, and ever since I finished it, I've been meaning to reread it, just because I really loved it, and I think I would enjoy reading it again. And there are the whaling chapters in here that are kind of long and a bit boring, but I'd like to take a bit of a closer look and see what more I can get out of those, or try to see better why they're there, and also just re-experience the parts that I did love, like the parts where they're actually whaling, the last 3 chapters, which are spectacular, and the first 150 to 200 pages, which I really enjoyed, and just the prose, which is beautiful throughout this. So yeah, Moby Dick. The last month that I had a book from was October, which is one of the prompts is to reread a science fiction book. And for this, I'm going to go with Dune by Frank Herbert. everyone knows Dune, I think, on BookTube by this point, but one of the classics of science fiction, and I haven't read it in a long time, and when I did read it, it took me about 2 years, yeah, I mean, I have been meaning to reread. I actually want to reread all three of the books of the Dune series that I have read, and then keep reading further. Steve Donahue kind of recommended the fourth book in the series to me. I had stopped at the third book because I thought that the next books might not be that good, but Steve recommended the fourth book at least. So I want to reread these three beforehand though, because I forgot a lot of what happened. So yeah. Those are my picks for this rereadathon. I don't want to hold this as like a formal like obligatory TBR for me. Just because I'm a very feeling reader. So if I'm not feeling rereading any of these at the time that the month rolls around where the rereadathon is happening, then I won't do it. But when I do, I will make videos about it, of course. So yeah, that is the rereadathon. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.